We are in on lesson number 10, I believe. Lesson number 10. And we're covering 1 Samuel 27 through 30. 1 Samuel 27 through 30. So let's go ahead and bow for a word of prayer. God, thank you so very much for being with us today and letting us come out here with your people and gather together and to remember your Son and what a wonderful sacrifice he made on our behalf. We know that we were guilty and he died for us. But he didn't stay in the grave. He raised from the dead. And we know that one day we will raise to be with you forever. We're so grateful for that, Lord, and the promises that you made. We're thankful for your word. We thank you for David, and we thank you for giving us so much information about David. You tell us he's a man after your heart, and then you tell us so many details of his life so that we can investigate that and find out what it means to be someone after your heart. And then you've recorded in your book a lot of his writings, so we not only know what David did, but we know what he felt while these things were happening. So what a huge blessing this is for us, Lord, to be able to study his life, the one that you made such a good promise to, that the Messiah would come through his reign, his lineage. Help us as we study today, that we'll learn the lessons that you'd have us to learn, and that you will be honored in our study together. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so in our story, what's happened where we left off last time was David spares Saul's life a second time. And at the end of that, where Saul says, David, come on back, I'm not going to do you any harm, David processes that information, and he doesn't say, okay, I'll come back. He says, you know what? I can't trust this man, Saul. He's just doesn't have God's Spirit with him anymore. He's acting sporadically. I can't trust him. And so Saul goes back to the palace where David really belongs, and Saul doesn't belong for now. And David just goes back to the wilderness, but then he's thinking, what am I going to do? This cat and mouse game I've been playing with Saul for these maybe 6, 7, 8 years up to this point, it's not doing me very much good. And so the best thing that I can do at this point is I can go back to the territory of the Philistines. And if I go back to the territory of the Philistines, I know Saul doesn't have any desire to come to the territory of the Philistines, knock on the gates of Gath, and want to pick a fight with the Philistines, so I'll be safe and sound in the Philistine territory. So he goes back to Gath, and this is probably about 2 years from when he was there the last time. Remember when he was there the last time? This is after he goes and gets the sword, and he takes the showbread. After that, he goes to Gath, and he has to act like he's crazy in order to not get killed. So about 2 years ago, he's acting like he's crazy so he doesn't get killed. But now he goes back there. And when he goes back there, he's actually given a pretty good welcome. Achish accepts him in to the city, and David starts doing some things for the king. Well, David goes to the king and says, look, it doesn't make sense that I live here in the royal city. I'm not a Philistine. I'm not really fit to be in the royal city. So why don't you give me another city? And so he gives them Ziklag. And so David goes down to Ziklag, and he takes over Ziklag with his 600 men and their families. So 600 men, all their families. You're talking a pretty good chunk of people, right? I mean, husband and wife, so 600 men, you're already up to 1,200. And they had more kids than we do today, typically. So some of these guys may have had, 6, 8, 10, 12 kids, however that case. So you got a pretty good chunk of people to take care of. And so they go down to Ziklag, and when they're at Ziklag, David performs some raids. We'll look at the map a little bit later. But basically what he does is I'll do this. He's up here, at Ziklag is down here, and he goes further down south to the Amalekite, where they are from, sort of between the Promised Land and Egypt. And there are several different groups of people living down there. He goes down to those areas and he raids the people. And so what a raid is you go into the city and you steal everything. So that's the first thing David's doing. He's going to the cities and he's stealing all their stuff. And that's not all he's doing. When he goes to the city, after he takes all their stuff, he kills them all. He kills the men, the women, the children. They're all dead. And the reason he does that is because his cover story back to Achish, the king of Gath, is going to be he's raiding the territory of Judah. So what happens, and he knows that if I don't kill all the witnesses, somebody's going to escape and tell the king of Gath, David is lying to you. He's not raiding his own people. He's raiding the enemies of his people, and that's going to cause David a problem. So David, after he gets done raiding, he goes back and reports to the king of Gath, hey, and you can just sort of see this, hey, where'd you go today? Where you been raiding? Where you been killing people and taking their stuff? Let's just pause there for a second, because we've noted this before, but I think it's important for us to nail this down. This was a totally different time period. Totally different world. You have to, we're going to be honest, it's not good. What David is doing is not good, right? And what David's going to do later is not good. We're not going to sugarcoat it, but we can't get our current day mind around this, living in America, around this particular mindset. I'm sure there are other places in the world this still takes place. People go and steal and kill people just to get their necessities. But one thing that I think we all have to do is we have to not fall for the temptation of judging previous generations by our current day standards. That just doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anything, because what's going to happen one day, what's going to happen in 200 years or 100 years when they're looking back at what we're doing right now? You think they're going to say, oh, those were the greatest people ever. They always made right decisions. They never made any mistakes. No, they're going to look back at us and they're going to say, those guys were foolish, knowing what they know now. So knowing what they had to do at the time, they didn't have factories they could go work at. They didn't have a place to live. The only way they could provide for these 600 people, he tried just asking Nabal for it. That didn't really turn out that well. This was the default way to support all these guys. And we also have to remember this. Who was he raiding? And this is, I think, an important detail of the story that maybe has passed our minds sometimes.
Oh, you got other stuff in
the Amalekites was one of the groups, right?
There you go.
The Amalekites was one of the groups. Should the Amalekites be alive right now? No. Why? Who should have killed them? Saul was supposed to kill them. So you have King Saul that God said, go wipe out all the Amalekites. Now we know why God said that, because when they were coming out of the promised land, they would sneak behind and they would kill off all the weak people that were falling behind. And God was not upset with that. There was that battle where Joshua led the battle. Moses set up on the mountain and he had to have his hands raised. As long as his hands were raised, God's people would win. That was against the Amalekites. Do you recall the two people who held his hands up? Trivia question here. Goes back to one of our, we had a gathering last night. We were having some quizzes. All right, Mary's going to know. Aaron and Hur. Those are the two people that were responsible for holding his hands up. And as long as they held his hands up, he would have victory. All right, gold star goes to Mary. If I had a prize, I'd give it to you, but I don't have any prizes. So that's what's taking place. So we can be in shock that David's doing this, or we can look at the whole picture. God wanted the Amalekites dead anyway. So David was just carrying out God's will on the Amalekites and these other nations, the thing that Saul should have done, but did not have the ability to do, or did not have the desire to do. So a war breaks out. In chapter 28, a war breaks out between the Philistines and the Israelites. Well, this puts David in the middle of something, right? And so Achish, the king of Gath, calls David in and says, hey, I hope you know that you're going with me. I hope you know you're going with me to fight the Israelites. And David's response is, good. Now you're going to see what I'm able to do. And you haven't seen my rage. You haven't seen what me and my men are able to accomplish and bringing you back all this stuff from these foreign countries. Now you're going to see firsthand. And his mindset here is, I've got David exactly where I want him. because David can't go back to the Israelites because he's been raiding their territory. Now, he hasn't been raiding their territory. He's been lying to Achish this whole time. So Achish is like, hey, he's made himself odious to his own people. They're never going to take him back. And then the Bible does something that's interesting, and we are aware of this. This happens in modern day storytelling, where you sort of pause that scene and you go to another scene. And so our minds are capable of doing that. I thought about not doing that because just to follow the scene of David all the way through, but let's pause this so we know what's going on in David's life. He's raiding, bringing things back to the king of the Philistines in Gath. And right at this moment, he's been told, you're going with me to fight the Israelites. Now, the scene shifts back to Saul. And I think why this is helpful, this is the life and character of David. Why this is helpful is that these two men, a lot of times, what people will do when they write stories is they will contrast two people. And the only way to truly understand the hero of the story is to understand the villain of the story. And without the villain of the story and the contrast that goes back and forth, you don't fully understand it. So I think God's doing that right here. He's giving us this contrast between David, who is the hero, and so for you fully understand David, you have to fully understand Saul, because you see they're sort of opposites. One's the good guy, one's the bad guy. Does that make sense? I think we're used to that happening. So he flashes back to Saul over here, and Saul, all these Philistines have gathered together, and Saul is scared to death. Now, Saul has been scared to death when the Philistines gathered together. David had to come in and save him with the giant, right? So Saul is scared to death. He asked God, are you going to be with me? Crickets. God is not answering. He's not sending dreams. He's not talking to prophets. They're using the Urim and Thummim, the two stones, and trying to get God to say, should I go to battle? Are you going to deliver me? And God doesn't say a word to Saul. He is not talking to Saul. He's already said he wasn't going to talk to Saul anymore, and he says, I'm done with you. I've rejected you because you didn't kill the Amalekites when I told you to, and you offered sacrifices you had no business offering. Your heart's not good. I need somebody that has a better heart. So Saul, instead of doing what we think he should have done, is just acknowledging that God's no longer with me. What can I do to help David? He doesn't do that. I don't know what the thought process is in his mind, but he thinks, I know what I will do. I will find a witch or medium, and I will go ask her to bring up Samuel from the dead. And I'll ask Samuel if God's going to be with me or not be with me. Now, the Bible is clear in Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12, and Leviticus 19:31, that this is an abomination to God. Total abomination. You can't have anything to do with it. And Saul himself knew that, and he passed an additional law in his time saying none. I mean, the Bible, God says none. I'm saying none. None of these people are here. So in order to go down and get this witch of Endor to talk to him, he disguises himself. He doesn't go in his kingly outfit. He disguises himself. He goes in and talks to her. And they ask if she can do this for him, and her first response is, "No way! I mean, you know what Saul said. I'm not doing this. That's against God's law." And Saul himself says this is outlawed. Well, she's talking to Saul, and she just doesn't know it. And Saul reassures her, saying, "You're not going to die. Just do this." And so what happens is she goes, "Who do you want to call? Who do you want to talk to?" And before anything could happen, Samuel. She sees Samuel, and she panics. And she's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing to me here?" And you could just see the panic in her voice, because I don't believe they really had the power to call people up from the dead. Too many things in the Bible indicate that they didn't have that. That wasn't something that they could literally do. I think God did allow it this time, and it shocked her. It really shocked her. And he says, it's okay. Just tell me what you're seeing. And she describes what she is seeing. He goes, "Oh, that's Samuel. That's Samuel, all right." And he falls on his face. He lies on the ground, face to the ground. And he has this conversation with Samuel. And Samuel's first response is, why are you bugging me, basically? Why, you know? And you have these scenes sometimes, even when people are raised from the dead, you wonder how that was, how that was handled and all that. But Samuel's like, why are you bothering me here? And he tells them, I've tried to talk to God. God's not talking to me. And you could just sort of see Samuel's response. Yeah, I told you that. I told you God wasn't going to talk to you anymore. I told you that he rejected you and he was finding something better. This is a stupid thing that you're doing to ask me to come help you when God says no. And I'm just going to tell you this. Everything that I said is going to come true. And God has found someone better than you, and his name is David. And so Saul is just distraught. And if you read the text, hopefully you all have the chance to do that, and hopefully you're highlighting the emotions. When Saul gets this message, and not only does he get this message that God has rejected you, God has found somebody better than you, somebody has a heart like you, what is the other kicker that would have really put it over the edge for Saul at this particular moment? Tomorrow you're going to be here with me. You and your sons. You're all going to die in this battle that you're about to face. And so at this point, Saul just collapses. He hadn't eaten all day. He just collapses. He has no energy left. And if you haven't eaten all day, and then this experience, you're going to die tonight, and all your sons are going to die too. And then she has to beg him to eat. And he goes, no, I'm not going to eat anything. And then all his guys come, eat something. And he's going to have to go to battle. But the God sort of leaves that story there. All right, so that's where that story is at this point. Then he shifts back to the story of David and telling of this story. So where we left David off, David was told by the king of Gath, Achish, that you're going to go with me to battle. And so they're lining up, they're marching down, and all of a sudden, the other Philistine rulers see David. And they're like, oh, Achish, what are you doing? Isn't that the guy that he's an Israelite? And don't they say things about him like, he's killed thousands and tens of thousands? And he goes, no, you don't get it. I know this guy. At this point, he's been a year and 4 months. He's been with me for a year and 4 months. Everything he's done is perfect. He's never done anything bad. He's perfect. I vouch for him. And they say, no, just get rid of him. He can't go with us. So he has to go tell David, you can't go to battle with us. David seems to be upset about that.
Huh?
We can talk about that in a minute. David seems to be upset about that.
No.
And he said, why? What have I done? I've been good. I know you're like an angel of the Lord, but we're not going to make the rest of the kings mad. You just wake up early in the morning, you and your men, and you go. Well, David wakes up early in the morning. He goes back to Ziklag. As he's walking towards Ziklag, he starts seeing some signs of disaster. Just picture this for a second in your own mind. You're walking to a city. You see smoke coming up from the city that you just left your 2 wives in and the rest of everybody else's family. And all the men that are with you, 600 men now, are seeing this is something bad happening. And they get there. No one's there. All their stuff is gone. And they are so mad, they are about to kill David. They want David dead. And David calms them down, and he strengthens himself in the Lord. And they make a plan. And they go to try to trace down who took all their stuff. And they find a guy who had been left, he was sick. And his master left him for dead. He goes, you know what's happened here? Yes, we've been raiding, Ziklag, all that good stuff. Tell me where these people are. I'll tell you if you don't kill me. I promise I won't kill you. He takes them down there. David sees them all scattered, just having a good old time. I mean, they are just eating all the stuff, and they're just having a party. They've won these victories. They're celebrating to their God. And all of a sudden, David comes down, whack. For a day and a half, they fight. And David kills them all, except 400, I think it was, that escaped on camels. And then takes all their stuff back. So now David is no longer the villain. His own men don't want to kill him anymore, but there's another problem. Because did all the guys go down to fight this? 200 of them were too tired. And so they get back to the 200, and the 400 men who went with them all the way say, all right, this is how we're going to handle this. You guys were too tired. And I'm sure this is derogatory. You guys just weren't men enough to go down and fight this whole battle with us, and you had to stay here. So what we're going to do is we're not going to give you any of the spoils. We'll be good to you. We'll give you your wives back and your children back, and we want you out of here. Just leave. David's like, whoa, wait a minute here. That's not how we're going to handle this situation. These men were guarding our supplies. The people who go and the people who guard the supplies are going to get the same reward. We're going to split it equally. This is a day of victory. This isn't a day where anybody's going to be sent off. Let's remember what's happened here. God's given us a good victory here. So that was a law that was from then on out that was going to take place. All right, so let's go ahead and stop there and start talking about some of these questions. First of all, one of the things I like to do before we get into the questions and try to veer away from answering the questions directly if you can, just anything in the text itself that stood out to you this time as you read it, as you looked over it, that maybe you had skipped over before or didn't realize that was in there or had forgotten that was in there, or any lessons you learned generally. Debbie has one. Go ahead and raise your hand. We have 2 mic runners. Will, Debbie has one. Wait for the microphone. If somebody else have something, raise your hand so we can get that microphone to you so you're ready to go.
Well, when I first read it, I was really puzzled on in 30:30 when it said, that the Amalekites had raided Ziklag, and I thought, well, if David had already raided the Amalekites when he was in the area, why were these Amalekites allowed to raid it? But then I talked to my husband about it, and we discussed it, and he said probably because these people it said that there were different districts, and so he had raided some of the districts and had killed the Amalekites, but they were in other places.
He had still not wiped out all the Amalekites at this time. So he had not killed all the Amalekites. And think about this for a second. What group of people would have the most motivation to go raid David's territory in Ziklag? It would be the people he's been raiding our family and our relatives all this time. Let's go back and get the revenge and raid him and steal his family away from him. Let him know what it feels like. Now, it is interesting. They don't carry it as far as David did. David killed them all. They're not killing all David's wives and his family. Now, that's probably God's provisions, not necessarily because the Amalekites had a tender heart for David and his family. It's probably God taking care of them. Joe, if you have something else, go ahead and raise your hand so you can get the microphone to you before.
Try not to answer the question, but one thing that you had mentioned about him sort of tricking Achish is it just reinforces that David has a propensity, and this is one thing it just reminded me of not really telling the truth or being sneaky and stuff, because where are you going down there? Oh yeah, I'm just wiping out those guys left and right, but he's going down to the Amalekites. So it was something just to remind me that David's not perfect.
Yeah,
and I don't want to go too much further, so I don't take the question. But this is just another thing that I had forgotten. That here's another instance of David doing something shifty.
Yeah, I'll ask this for everybody. Has it surprised you a little bit as you've gone back through this and looking at the whole David's life as a whole, how many times he does lie? I mean, this isn't a one-off for David. He has lied multiple times. And this is another occasion where he is not telling the truth in this. And so it is sort of interesting. But we do note what is one of the things we focused on. These are real people with real personalities making decisions in real time that have real consequences. I can't stand too much in judgment on David in this, and we won't go too deep into this. But if somebody were to come to my house and all my kids were hiding, and they were to ask me point blank, where are your kids? I'm going to kill them. I would feel pretty justified in saying they're not here or whatever the case may be. When life is at stake here, you can make clear-cut black and white. You should never lie under any circumstances, whatever. We do see a lot of times where God sort of protects David in these. We have Rahab who doesn't tell the truth to protect life. And I would be very caution you about that, because we know that we're supposed to be honest. And so we're not looking for times not to be honest. And I would say none of us will probably ever encounter a time where someone's life is really going to be in danger if we tell the truth or not tell the truth. I always told my kids that it doesn't mean you're just afraid you're going to get a spanking. That's not, your life's not, you did something wrong, you're going to have to fess up to it. You can't lie about that. But in a life and death situation, it's a little trickier. The Bible is not, it does give us a lot of examples. I don't want to get bogged down in that. I just ask you to think about that. Real people making real decisions in real time with real consequences. If I didn't have food to eat, we talked about the pyramid. If I didn't have food to eat and God already said he wanted all the Amalekites dead, I think I could pretty much say, I could justify that saying, my 600 guys have to eat. They're God's enemies. God's already told Saul to kill them all. He just hasn't done it. I'm going to go down and carry that out. So I don't think David wasn't ruthless to the point of killing people unnecessarily, but he does do some things here. Now, I found this interesting. What happened last time David was there? He had to act insane. What changed? I mean, to me, this would be the last place I'd go back. It's where Goliath's hometown, for one. They know who David is, because last time he was there, they said, that's that David guy who they say he's killed 10,000 people. So what do you think's changed over this time period where David feels comfortable going back to the Philistines in the exact same town that he acted like he was crazy in, to the exact same king? Did that strike you? Did that strike anybody as being, why would David do this? The things that I could come up with is, one, time changes things. Who was with David when he went the first time? Nobody. David was by himself. Remember when he left the priest, and the priests were executed later, but when he left the priest, the showbread and the sword, he didn't have a group of men with him. He was by himself. When he goes there, he's by himself. When he leaves Gath the first time, goes down to the cave, is where his 400 men and his parents come. So you have a single guy acting like a crazy man. How valuable is he to you at this point? There's no strategic value in letting him say, he doesn't have anything to offer me. When he comes back with 600 men who are warriors, mercenaries, if you will, and you're a king, and this is the life that their life is lived. Now what can David offer you? I think David has a lot more to offer him now. He's got 600 guys, warriors, who have a reputation, and so that sort of changes his idea. Plus, can a guy who was acting crazy amass 600 guys and lead 600 men? Probably not. So he was temporarily not himself when he was here clawing on the walls and drooling all over himself, and he's proven that he's not that guy anymore, and now he's useful to me. I think that is the only thing I can say to make sense from all this. All right, so I'm going to do something different. You have 5 questions. We've answered the same 5 questions every time. I'm going to let you answer whatever question you want to answer in whatever order you want to answer it, because we seem to jump around, and sometimes we're answering about order. But I think, let's go ahead and put the thing up here so we sort of get an idea of where we are. Do we have one up there? There we go. So this is the territory that we're dealing with here. So you see Ziklag is right there. And so this is where Saul is from right there. This is where Gath is. And so David has gone down to Ziklag. He is going down here and raiding these territories down here on the way to Egypt. He is saying he is raiding these areas right here. And there's 2 particular, he said Judah in that area, and then he mentions a particular tribe or a family in Judah, and then he mentions allies to Judah. The third name that he mentions with the Kenites, they weren't from Judah, but that is where Jethro was from. So they were allies. Jethro is Moses' father-in-law. So they were allies. So in other words, I am raiding my own people and the allies of my people. That's what he's telling them. And then this next slide here sort of gives us a little indication. This is indoor. This is where that battle is going to take place with the Philistines. And so this is Ziklag. So David is up here in Gath somewhere, ready to go up here and fight where Saul's going to end up dying. And he's sent back to Ziklag. And the previous one tells us, showed us where the Amalekites were actually from down here. Hopefully that gives you some insight into the map. So you can go ahead and turn that off. I don't need that anymore. Answer the first 5. Any of the questions you want to ask. What do we learn from the story? What do we learn from David? What do we learn from people in the story? All this good stuff. All right, Jason, lead us off.
I find it interesting that it's an example of what we do sometimes. We go to God in desperation without first examining ourselves and taking care of ourselves. Saul, he's desperate. He wants to talk to God. I personally believe Saul probably didn't believe in the divination for real. But he was so desperate that he was willing to give anything a shot. But instead of in his despair going, why is God not talking to me? He's, gone to desperate measures. And
he's definitely scared for sure.
And he's already been told, both by the prophet and by God, I'm done with you. And why that God was done with him. And I also kind of find it interesting. I don't know where we're at between death and judgment, but my understanding is it's some kind of rest. So I can, Samuel's like, what, Lord, you're sending me again? Like, I did that. And he's now at rest, and he's like, and you're making me go back and deal with this guy again? Yeah. And I just find it humorous.
That's obviously not the main point of this whole story. And
no.
There's a lot of questions about what exactly happens when we die.
But I just think it's humorous that
interesting.
He would have been at rest. And I kind of always think of the old movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg, because she was a fake medium, and then the ghost shows up. And I just always find that humorous, though, is the lengths we will go to in desperation without just calmly looking at ourselves and seeing why God has allowed us to be in a situation.
Fear does a lot to our ability to rationalize things, right, and make good decisions. That's why you really make bad decisions when you're afraid, and that's what he's doing. If you go back to chapter 23, chapter 28, in verse 5, when Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was absolutely terrified. So he is scared. He thinks he's going to lose. God is not with him. When God doesn't answer him, he becomes more and more afraid and distraught and isolated from God. So you have fear, and then you have isolation. Your connection to God is gone. You're going to do some very desperate things under those things. And I hope you're doing this as well. If you notice verse 13, she was very afraid. Verse 12, the woman saw Samuel. She cried out loudly, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." And the king said to her, "Don't be afraid." And if you go down to verse 15, it says, "I am terribly troubled." And if you go to verse 20, Saul quickly fell full length on the ground and was very afraid because of Samuel's words. And verse 21, when the woman came to Saul and saw how terrified he was. Anytime you see an emotional word like this in the Bible, it's worth noting, because that helps you understand these are real people in real time with real emotions. If you just gloss over, he was a little scared. No, he wasn't a little scared. He thought he was going to die, and this is significant. Debbie?
I was going to bring up the same thing Jason said.
Okay.
That Saul just didn't understand why God wasn't there for him.
Okay. And we've talked about this before. The best thing for Saul to have done would have been turned over the keys to the castle to David and said, "Let me help." He doesn't do this. He's holding on to power. He doesn't have a good heart. People like power. People like power, people like money, people like influence. They don't give it up very easily.
Yeah, just in regards to looking at the character of David and looking at the character of Saul, I think I see two things about Saul that we can determine, and one is that he was filled with pride, the kind of pride that the Lord hates. You go back to when he was instructed to destroy the Amalekites, and what is this I hear, the bleating of the sheep and the lowing of the oxen. He brings back spoils of war that he was told to destroy so he could enjoy the glory and look what I've done. He was a man of pride. He was also a coward. On first pass in chapter 28, it says that he ridded his provinces of the spiritists and the mediums. But he turns right around and usurps his own law by disguising himself and going to a medium to raise up Samuel. And so he's a coward at this point. God's withdrawn from Saul, and he's a coward. He sees the armies of the Philistines, and he's trembling. He's scared to death, and God hates a coward. So I think all these things that are happening to Saul are of his own making, and it's because God has already withdrawn from him, and he's finding himself in a death spiral.
Yeah, and the contrast is, I mean, when God says to Saul, when you were little in your own eyes, I made you king. So Saul has built a monument for himself. He thinks bigger of himself than he really is. David seems to be humble all the way through his life. We'll continue to go there. He's going to make mistakes, but he trusts God more than Saul did, and he's definitely not a coward. Saul was even a coward to go fight Goliath. He didn't have the strength to go fight Goliath. And even with the Amalekites, not killing the Amalekites, what reason does he give for not killing the Amalekites? Sacrifice the Lord, but also I'm scared of the people, right? The people want to do this, not me. Well, what kind of a leader would not have the capacity to stand up to the people he's leading and say, no, God said to destroy everything. We're destroying everything. So he was afraid of the enemy. He was afraid of God's own people. He was just afraid of his shadow, it seemed like, and David wasn't that. And that's why when we have these stories, a lot of times the contrast helps us understand the character of David. Because we see the contrast in Saul. He was a coward. David wasn't. David believed in God. And he was somebody who didn't obey. David did obey. Saul was not humble. David was humble. So the contrast helps us see more clearly David's character. And so always keep that in mind.
Yeah, at the very beginning of 27, it's interesting that David says to himself, I'm going to be swept away by the hand of Saul. I don't know that you could say that that's unfaith, or he was not faithful, but I think you could see the fatigue in David. I mean, he's already been anointed. People have already told him, Jonathan and the like have said, you're going to be king and stuff. And he says, I'm going to be swept away by the hand of Saul. Well, if you believe in God and everything that he says, then you won't be swept away by God, or by Saul, excuse me. You're going to be, it'll be hard. And he says, there's nothing better for me to do than to go to the land of the Philistines. So I think it was interesting that, to me, this is a bit of just being tired or weakness, that he would say, Saul's going to catch me someday, and I'm tired of running, so I'm going to go to the Philistines, the enemy of God. So I thought that was an interesting contrast of what usually how David thinks.
Yeah. So what I've written on my notes is faith and reality can coexist. So I think David still has faith here.
Yeah. I'm not saying
I know. But he's also dealing with a reality. Saul's crazy. Saul just said, come on back, David. And David has enough instincts and smarts about him to know that's a false, that's not where I can't trust Saul. So he's not going to put his trust in Saul. Now, it is interesting, and we have a couple more people, so I get you. We need a microphone up here. All right. I think we lost a runner here. All right.
Mine's for question 6. What do we learn from God from this story? I think we learn that God says, what he says he's going to do, he's going to do.
Okay.
He's
very
given him
good.
several chances, and Saul didn't do it, and God abandoned him.
God is faithful to both sides of it. If he says I'm going to punish you if you do evil, he's faithful to that too. If he says he's going to reward you when you do good, he's faithful to that as well. So God doesn't lie. Now, I do think, before we get to Debbie for a second, I hope I don't steal your thunder here, because I want to get this out. Real people making real decisions in real time. and I've said this before, and I do believe this, David had good instincts for the most part. I don't think going to the Philistines was a great instinct on David's part. And I think God protects him from his bad instincts. Because did David want to go with Achish to battle God's people? He's saying he wants to go. Now, I don't think David would have gone and killed Saul, obviously. I don't think he would. It's against his entire character to go kill God's people. We've noted that. Is David okay with killing God's enemies? Yes. Is David okay with killing God's people? No. We're going to see that come up over and over and over again. But can sometimes you think you're stronger than you really are and put yourself in a pretty bad spot? And this is one of those times where I think if God were to rehash David, I think David understood God was behind the scenes a lot. Mm-hmm. But I think this is one time where God would say, David, you know when you wanted to go? I'm the one that stopped that from happening because you were going to put yourself in a position that there was a no-win situation. And I wasn't ready for that to happen. You say you're going to wait for my timing and Saul's going to die however he wants, and then you're going to put yourself in the position where maybe you're going to try to protect Saul when I'm trying to kill Saul. You know, I'm trying to kill him. That's what you said that I could kill God, make his life end however I want, either old age or die in battle. I'm trying to help him die in battle, and here you want to go to this battle. And I know your heart, David. If someone's getting ready to kill the Lord's anointed, you're not going to stand by and let him do it. You're going to get in the way. So I think this is a case where God really intervenes in David's life and says, no, David, your heart's probably good here, but you're still a man and you're still going to make a bad choice. This is a no-win for you. I'm going to protect you from this. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I think it was providence why the rest of the kings of the Philistines said, no, don't take David. And David didn't like that answer, but it was because he justified, no, I'm a good man. I've been faithful to you this whole time. I know you have, but just go back home. Plus, if he goes to war, what happens to his family and all the people there? You know? Because now they didn't get much of a head start. He was able to track them down. If they go all the way down to the Amalekites, or maybe they decide to, I think this definitely has God's hand in all along. Debbie?
Oh, I was going to say something different. I just was saying, I was thinking that because David, while he was in the enemy camp in the Philistines, he was able to raid those towns and get rid of some of God's enemies. I thought he was like there for an inside job. And I thought when he went to battle that he may have turned.
He may have.
And helped to destroy some of the Philistines.
That may have been David's plan, but that wasn't God's plan.
So yeah. I thought he was doing actually something good,
Yeah, I don't think David was going there with the thought, I'm going to kill God's people. I just can't see that being part of who David was. So he probably had something in the back of his mind, I'm going to go there to protect God's people, not hurt them. And that's what the wisdom of the other Philistine leaders were, hey, what better way is there for him to get back on the good graces of his master than to rise up in battle against us if he's on our, so they saw through it when others couldn't see that. All right, Will, you have about 30 seconds.
Perfect, that's about all I need. I was just going to say if the topic hasn't moved too far from it, Saul, with the pride and all the decisions leading up to his death, I think he didn't have to take things that far. Obviously, God knows everything, but if he was able to let down his pride, he probably could have let off the throne and still serve God.
Yeah, I think that's true about God. God's willing to forgive everybody. So a couple things. We have about 10 seconds left. Even faithful people sometimes make decisions based on their fear rather than trusting in God. God works through our imperfect decisions to accomplish his purposes. Have you ever made a bad decision and God still used that for something good? And you're looking back at that and say, boy, that was, you might say I got lucky there, but sometimes instead of saying I got lucky, God helped me out on that particular occasion. Because you're going to make bad decisions, hope that God's going to have. In moments of deep distress, true strength is found by turning back to God. The whole passage, you go back and read that. when he gets there and he realizes his whole family, you can go ahead and ring it. He realizes his whole family's gone and everybody's ready to kill him. I don't know. I would like to know exactly what this looked like. It says he strengthened himself in the Lord. I mean, I sort of picture sitting down on a big old rock somewhere or a tree stump and just praying for a few minutes. God, help me here. I mean, I'm in a desperate situation. These guys are about ready to kill me, and all of our family's gone, all of our stuff's gone. And instead of giving up or turning to himself or turning to the people or giving in, he goes, no. Who has the answer here? God has the answer. God has the answer. All right, everybody, thank you.